Hello and welcome along to Utter Punts. It's another episode where it's been a ridiculously tight week in the NFL with plenty of scorelines to talk about. We'll talk about loads and loads of stuff. The only things that we won't talk about are the New York Giants. So moving swiftly on, Jim. I said it was a tight week in the NFL. It was ridiculous how tight these games were this week.
Absolutely, yeah. Five one-score games in the NFL this week. And then I wouldn't say there were blowouts. There were a good couple of blowouts as well. But it's getting to crunch time in the season, and you can tell. I think there were some surprisingly tight games, and then I think there were some non-surprising blowouts as well. The biggest surprise of the weekend for me was the Panthers taking the Chiefs to the last kick of the game, literally. That's the best, one of the best teams in the NFL against one of the worst, so you can't really say that was supposed to happen. But yeah, other than that, you had the Browns game, that was a one-score game. You had the Vikings game, that was a one-score game. The Cowboys and Commanders, that was absolutely crazy. There was a punt return touchdown, and then there was a onside kick return touchdown in that game, I think. So yeah, it's been a bit of a crazy weekend for NFL this week. And then obviously you had my man Jameis Winston doing snow angels on the field after we beat the Steelers. So Jameis Winston, national treasure. Note that down. Dave?
Yeah, Jameis Winston coming through once more, helping my fantasy team out. Not that anyone gives a crap. But all in all, it was a weird weekend. I'm not sure I actually enjoyed it. Like, from any sport, whether that be English football or American football. The Vikings obviously decided to do Vikings things, but the game that really stood out for me was the Cowboys actually beating the Washington Redskins, particularly at a point where Jaden Daniels actually looked a lot more like he was prior to the rib injury. But yeah, Cowboys pulling it out.
Just want to check that, is this a Dave thing where you've just decided not to kowtow to the change of the name of the Washington Commanders, or is this a genuine mistake from Dave?
It was a mistake, but at the same time, the people who are related to the person who was in the badge wanted it to be brought back, and there is talk about it maybe coming back. That's a topic for another time. It would be nice if it did, though. I think why disrespect that person's heritage? We can go on with this, but we should probably go back.
I was just checking whether or not it was one of those things that I should bring up or not, and I'm glad that I did. It was an error. Dave meant the Commanders, and we'll cross the potential.
Yeah, but if you want me to argue that it should be the other, I'm happy to play devil's advocate.
I think we've covered that base, and we do not need to retread that ground until a point comes where the ground needs retreading. I don't know, Ollie, about you. It was one of those crazy weekends where on paper none of the games looked like they were going to be all that entertaining, and actually it turned out to be miles closer than we anticipated.
Yeah, the Thursday night football game was great in the snow between Cleveland and the Steelers. Proper AFC North football. Jameis Winston putting his body on the line. At least, Jim, you and the other Browns fans, you might not make the playoffs, but you're getting a bit of enjoyment out of the season now. Two AFC North wins against the Ravens and Steelers. At least you can hurt your enemies, even if you're not,
the only team with a positive win-loss record in the AFC North. Every other team is at least even. So we've won 3 games this season, and 2 of those have been against the Ravens and the Steelers. So we're 2-1 in the division. Every other team is 500 or worse.
Which is crazy. Obviously, you had some games like Dave mentioned earlier that weren't a surprise, like the Dolphins absolutely battering the Patriots. The Dolphins, since Tua has come back, I think he's had 7 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 0 turnovers or interceptions. They look like they're in the hunt at the minute for the playoff. I think they're 5-6, but their division is really easy other than the Bills, with the Jets and Patriots in there. I'm sure we'll probably get onto the Jets absolutely capitulating as a franchise at some point. But, and then obviously we mentioned it before at the start. The Vikings and Bears games at Soldier Field are always weird. People are going to mention a lot about how Caleb performed. performed really well in that game, but I'll also mention that Jay Cutler used to tear us up at Soldier Field, like when we used to go there, and he was a terrible quarterback. So I think that's just the Vikings being the Vikings. But at the end of the day, no one in the media is going to really talk about how the Chiefs won 30-27, but the Vikings won the exact same. But the Chiefs are Super Bowl contenders and the Vikings are frauds. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting set of results, but it was a good weekend.
That was a bit salty, wasn't it? Was it because? Do you think it was because I said that I didn't miss him last week, that he had to call himself a fraud, tongue in cheek?
I don't know. There's been no reaction to that from Ollie. Just like,
that's obviously the reason. So
stony faced. He wants none of it.
Like we listened. Come on, lads.
Well, we know you did because you were badgering for the link within about 10 minutes of us finishing the record, me and Jim. Where can I listen, lads? All right, give me a sec to edit it, Dave.
Well, I didn't think it would take long.
Let's be honest, it's just nice to have Ollie here, isn't it, this week? He can't normally make time for us. He's normally taking pictures on Instagram with Vikings players from 47 years ago and all that important stuff, and getting his mum to tie shoelaces and stuff like that. So
I've never known a student travel as much as Ollie seems to travel between two locations. It's unbelievable.
Unlimited budget, mate. It's genuinely unreal. Unlimited budget as a student.
I wish. It's not. It's
gonna say if it's an unlimited budget, then why do you keep borrowing money off me, man?
Guys, should we talk about that? We've led nicely into it, so I think we might as well talk about the Vikings game at the weekend. It was very entertaining, and every non-Vikings and Bears fan, I would probably surmise. I jumped the gun because I thought you'd blown it completely and sent a message to the group chat. This is the second time this season I've jumped the gun.
We need you to do it at the start of a game.
I was going to say, it's starting to really annoy me because I start to revel in the Vikings' decline and then they seem to pull it out after that. And then I have to just go back to abusing Ollie. So, yeah, it's just a vicious cycle. So, basically, if the Vikings lose, then you'll probably get a free ride for a week. But it hasn't happened very often this season. So, I've had to resort to scraping the barrel.
What's really interesting here for me is how good the Bears were, and more importantly than that, how quick Caleb Williams was. He released the ball on average in 2.9 seconds. That's how fast. What was the stat? Average pass came after 2.9 seconds, the 25th quickest time any signal caller.
I'm not surprised. At the end of the game, Brian Flores' defense is at its weakest when offenses go into quick hurry-up mode. Because the whole point of his defense is it's an enigma. You don't know how many he's going to drop back into coverage, how many are going to blitz at any one time, because they'll line up with all up front, they'll line up with two up front, and they'll keep alternating. When an offense goes into the hurry up mode, they don't really get the chance to do that fake blitz who's dropping into coverage. It's just that offense going, go. And like other teams have done it before, whenever they do the hurry up offense against us, it's a weakness and we give up massive yards, and it's happened the last 2 seasons. It's one of the few weaknesses of Brian Flores' defense. And probably most of that statistic of 2.9 seconds per release was probably upped by the final couple of plays with 25 seconds left on the clock.
So I was going to say that. So I've said, when I said how fast he released it, what I actually should have said was how slow he released it. That probably would have framed it slightly better. The time it took him to release is what I was getting at, was 2.9 seconds, which was the 25th fastest of any signal caller, which is actually therefore slow, not quick. But you've just made the point, Ollie, that actually maybe those averages being thrown off by what happened late in that game.
Yeah, there was so many chances during that game where the Vikings looked like it was going to be a blowout win, but it was a weird game. Like, there were so many things you don't see in a regular NFL game. The muffed punt from the Bears, which is just a bad coaching thing, where the guy's like, oh, let's stop, and then it hits him, and we jump on the ball and we get it. Aaron Jones fumbling on the 1 yard line, right at the beginning where we should have had a touchdown. An onside kick converted, the first one this season, because our third string tight end doesn't understand the rules, that if it hits you within the 10 yard within 10 yards of the ball being kicked, then it will go to the opposition, and they jumped on it. 2-point conversions from the Bears, the field goal, the fact that their first play after getting the touchdown, they threw it about 30 yards, then got the field goal and did it to overtime in one pass, which is what I was on about with the hurry up offense. It was a crazy game. There were so many moments for both teams that were just ridiculous. I mean, even at one point it looked like we were getting the return in overtime, and then Brandon Powell dropped the ball, but then he had his knees down, but it looked like he'd fumbled it again in a key moment. So it was just ball control. In terms of the Bears, I'll be honest, with better coaching, they might have won that game at the end. Matt Eberflus is terrible. I mean, they could have the Commanders game, they should have won. Hail Mary. Packers game, blocked field goal, should have won. Arguably, coming back against us, they should have won. That would put them in playoff contention, but now they're pretty much dead in water with a really tough schedule going on, like we mentioned a couple of weeks ago.
If they could defend the Hail Mary and successfully score a 46-yard field goal, the Bears would be 6-5.
It's poor discipline. I mean, you had a guy celebrating during the Hail Mary before the play had happened. There were moments in the Packers game where they could have killed them off, and everyone says, oh, it's field goal unlucky. Well, kill them off in regular time. Don't leave it to a last-minute field goal. And against the Vikings, like things like the muff punt and stuff like that, that is just poor coaching. If they get Ben Johnson from the Lions as their head coach next season, the Bears are going to be a threat because they've got the talent on that team to be that. But we're lucky in the NFC North that they've got a terrible head coach. They're unstable, and their players are ill-disciplined, and that's why those 3 games have swung the other way at the end of the day.
Dave, there's a couple of stats here. They've outscored opposing teams by 4 points this season, the Bears. And they've still got the record that they've got.
It's because they've got an awful quarterback. Oh, that's all there is to it. He runs around like it's backyard football. He had about 6-7 turnover-worthy plays against us. He got away with things rather than it was a wonderful bit of play. There was a couple where honestly, inches away from being picked. And yeah, he scrambled around. Great. Whoop-de-doo. Like, as you said, 2.9 seconds per pass. But I think what was confusing about it was, if you actually watched the whole game, you saw that he was getting the ball away in about half a second on numerous occasions. No-look passes as quick as he could. And then on other plays, he'd hang on to the ball for 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds, including on the last defensive drive within overtime for the Bears, where he basically just hung on to the ball until a 3-man rush got home. It was weird. It just showed a complete lack of awareness. I think he got overexcited by the fact that they came back. I mean, they did well to come back in many ways. The Vikings did the right thing, kicking the field goal to go up by 11 points, and then just conceded. But injuries bite teams in strange ways, because Johnny Munt, the only reason he was on the hands team and clearly hadn't prepped often to play there, was because Josh Oliver, who would normally have been there, was actually injured and didn't play just before the game. So these things happen. It was a comedy of errors. At no point did I particularly feel threatened, weirdly. It was just annoying, but it kept going on and on and on. And it should have been dead and buried far earlier. So yeah, it was one of them. What I would say is Justin Jefferson had, I think, statistically his worst or his second worst ever game, and yet he absolutely dominated that game. He was being triple teamed. Not in that way, Jim. He was being triple teamed by the defense, often in triple coverage, and he basically had everybody moving out of the way. It meant that Hawkinson got over 100 yards, Addison got over 100 yards, Naylor got a touchdown, Trent Sherfield was open. It is Trent Sherfield. He was open on a key down as well. And then there was a play where Darnold got injured and carried off into the blue tent. Nick Mullins came out and converted on the one play he was actually allowed for on a 3rd and 13. So, I mean, it was a strange game, but in all honesty, there needs to be a change of coaching at the Bears. the new OC is doing a fairly good job. He's from the Sean McVay tree, I believe. They've apparently revolutionised things by allowing all of the offense to meet together rather than just in segregated blocks. So now they actually do have a conversation about who might be open, who the hot route is, and that's why you've seen a marked improvement in moving the ball. But ultimately, Caleb's a problem. He always will be, because he can't take accountability for his own mistakes.
I wonder whether we'll see something different, Jim, with Aberfluss gone and whenever that happens. A clear game plan to take out Justin Jefferson. I think he was covered in, I think the stat is something like 60% of his routes he was covered off by Jalen Johnson, right? And then, but the problem with that is you can have a very clear game plan to deal with somebody like Justin Jefferson, but you've also got to have a game plan to deal with Addison and Hockenson, and they just didn't do that. And it's piss poor coaching, whether that's the defensive coordinator or whether it's Aberfluss, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, when you look at it, it's, the Vikings, I said before the season started, they've got one of the most balanced elite offenses in the league. They've got a clear 1 and 2 receiver. They've got Hockenson. Aaron Jones was a question mark for me, but he's done a good job in general for the Vikings, and he's really dragged them along. And that's the piece that they were really missing, was that steady running back. So I think, the Vikings offense would cause any defense an issue. Justin Jefferson was, what was he, two catches for 27 yards yesterday. I think it was 1 catch before overtime. So, look, I mean, and the proof's in the pudding. Jordan Addison, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 162 yards and a touchdown. So, you keep one of, this is why you need 2 high-end receivers, and the Vikings have got that. You could argue that Naylor's is a good third option as well. It's still not probably, it's slightly better than the top 2 on the Bears, but the Bears are 3 deep at receiver. But like Ali said at the start, this was a game of poor fundamentals from both teams. The Bears' fundamentals were poorer in general, but the Vikings didn't do a good job in certain situations either, specifically defensively. I think they've had trouble initially they had trouble getting home on the quarterback, and this is the weakness of the Vikings defense. Apart from that, go quickly, is the defensive back area. And when you put in receivers one-on-one, especially like Keenan Allen and people like that, big, strong receivers against some of these Vikings defensive backs, they're going to put up some yards and they're going to, win some battles. And it is what it is. You invest in pass rush and your back end takes a bit of a hit. So I think ultimately, I was pleased that the Vikings won, because I think I didn't want Eberflus to be validated, because I think we've probably smashed him to pieces on the last couple of podcasts, and I think we said he was going to be, I think we said he was number 2 on the list from last week, or number 3 on the list, and that's where, to be fair, after this week he deserves to be number 1 on that list, because he's squandering a first year of Caleb. There's been very little development there. Yes, he threw for 340 yards yesterday, but again, that was because a lot of that was horizontal. It wasn't going forward. A lot of it was in the screen game and receivers getting it after the catch. So, I'm with Dave. I won't anoint Caleb Williams this season, because he just doesn't do the fundamentals well. And it all comes down to that across the board for everything. So I think, the better team prevailed in the end yesterday, although it got to proper squeaky bum time when they got their touchdown, their 2-point conversion, and then scored that field goal right at the end. And the message I sent to the lads in the chat was the Vikings are Brownsing, because I've seen that play out before, and usually that would result in the Browns conceding another touchdown and losing the game on the last touch of the ball. So in some respects, I was pleased that my friends didn't have to go through that, because I think it's probably impacted my mental health significantly over the last 10 years of watching the NFL.
I wanted to mention as well one aspect of the Vikings that has arguably been the biggest worry of Vikings fans and any media that analyse the team is Sam Darnold, right? Obviously, the quarterback. I mean, I know we've got 9 wins now, but there's been games like against Jacksonville and against Indianapolis where he's thrown multiple interceptions, not many yards, and it's been that defense that's been carrying him. Yesterday, Cam Robinson, our left tackle, went out for the entire game in the first quarter, and obviously Christian Darrisaw, who's our starting left tackle, is out for the season. So we had our third string left tackle, David Quessenberry, in for the majority of the game. And Sam Darnold threw for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns. Had a pretty good game, to be fair. And when it mattered most, at the end of the game in overtime, once we got the ball back, drove us down the field with some really good passes to Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and won the game. I would say, personally, he's probably his best game as the Vikings quarterback this season. And although that's been the issue with us, either the offense has been performing really well or the defense, but we haven't had a complete game of both performing in unity, and that will probably be our issue when it comes to the playoffs.
Yeah, what's mental with this, though, is I thought Sam Darnold was an overpay as a backup quarterback at $10 million for the year, because the average backup quarterback money is, 4, 5, 6, 7 million. If you get, and that's about it. Sam Darnold, bringing him in on a 1-year contract at 10 million. I did not think in a million years that guy was going to make money this season. But let's look at this realistically now. There's 6 games left in 6, 7 games left in the season for teams, and then we're going into free agency. You're probably staring down the barrel of Sam Darnold being a $35 million quarterback next year because of how he's played for the minimum, and that's what we're talking. Kevin O'Connell, deserves consideration for Coach of the Year with what he's done with that offense and how he's got Sam Darnold to function. I think it helps that he was in Kyle Shanahan's system last year, and obviously O'Connell's come from that sort of background, so we knew he was going to fit the offense. But Sam Darnold's never been particularly accurate, but yet we're still seeing 65, 68% completion rates on a weekly basis, and that's what ultimately, when your first choice quarterback, which was JJ McCarthy, the anointed one to Dave, when he goes down, you want, if you can get your backup quarterback coming in there who can complete 65 to 70% of his passes, throw for 250, 300 yards on a weekly basis, you physically cannot ask for any more than that from a backup quarterback. And Sam Darnold hasn't looked like a backup quarterback this season. He's looked like a starting quarterback who plays with confidence, spreads the ball around, and is supported in a well-balanced offense. And that's Kevin O'Connell's doing. And a bit of a shout out to Kwesi as well in terms of his roster building and being able to pivot on a couple of things, like Ollie mentioned, the left tackle piece. Bringing in Aaron Jones has been, it's not quite a master stroke, but Saquon Barkley would have been a master stroke, but it's not far off. So I think when we look at that, the Vikings offense looks better under Sam Darnold than it did under Kirk Cousins consistently. And there's a lot of hope there for the future. And Sam Darnold's made himself millions and millions of dollars with his performance this year. Can we talk about Cleveland now?
Yeah, if you want to.
Do you want to talk about Cleveland?
Now we can cover it in about 30 seconds because I don't want it thrown back in my face.
I did want to ask Jim, would you, if you keep Stefanski, which I think you should still, would you take Sam Darnold at Cleveland?
For Myles Garrett? No,
I mean just Sam Darnold.
Because Daniel Jones is available if you really wanted anybody.
Wow. We'll come into we might as well talk about the Giants in a minute because there's a little bit of mileage in what we can talk about there. But yeah, I mean, Darnold at the Browns personally wouldn't be a choice for me at the moment, and that's because having watched Deshaun Watson be what we've seen from him, he's paid a lot of money. Darnold's going to cost a lot of money. To be honest, we're not in. I don't like. You start to look at it and evaluate it and go, are we going to be that much better that next year? Because like a lot of people are on big contracts. We don't have a lot of cap space. I think we've probably got to go with a rookie quarterback. So I be willing to pay Sam Darnold $35-40 million a year. Personally, not for the Browns. Will there be a team that will pay him that much? Absolutely. And I think there's probably at least half a dozen that you could reel off right now that Sam Darnold would be a starting quarterback. The concern I'd have is he's not going to be paired with Kevin O'Connell, who, like I said, should be consideration for Coach of the Year. And if he goes into a defensively coached team where their head coach is a defensive coordinator, I think Darnold would regress quite quickly, or has got the potential to regress quite quickly. And also, let's be honest, no one in the league has got the supporting supporting pieces that the Vikings have across the board on offense. So I think, I personally wouldn't take him, but that's just because of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, because you look at a lot of the teams that are struggling. Tennessee, they might need a callback. Levis has played okay the last 2 weeks, but they're probably, going to be high draft pick. They might go for one, but obviously that's Brian Callahan. So that is an offensive coordinator, right, from the Bengals. So that could be a pairing. Jacksonville, Doug Peterson's going to be fired, so we don't know whether that's going to be an offensive.
Trevor Lawrence is set there at 6.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. So the Raiders are probably going to draft one. That's what they're looking at. The Giants need one, but we don't know whether, and I will get onto that, but we don't know whether Daboll's going to be the coach there. There's a lot of teams that the Browns need one, but like you just mentioned about the cap space, paying off Deshaun Watson's contract. So there are teams that quarterback needed, but is Darnold going to be a fit? Can they afford them? Can they afford him? I personally, if the Vikings, even if we didn't have JJ McCarthy, I wouldn't want to pay Sam Darnold 35 to 40 million because I've seen the moments. And I worry that if he's not, like you mentioned, Jim, if he's not paired with Kevin O'Connell, that he might regress back to where he is. He's not Baker Mayfield level, who got paid the same amount as Bucks.
So to do Darnold a little favour, I will point out that whilst we're only paying him 10 million, we're actually committed to the tune of 38 million per year to the QB position, not counting what we're paying JJ McCarthy. So the squad that we've got this year is kind of reminiscent of what a team could put together if they were paying him around that mark. Anything north of 40 million would be nuts. I wouldn't sign him, because you're going to have to pay him, and I don't think it's a wise move. But at the same time, a team will gamble. A team will go and get him. In an ideal world, what Darnold should do is just sign for another 10 million a year for the Vikings for the next 3 years. That's what he should do.
We'll wait and see, won't we? That's the thing to do. We are going to move on and talk about the thing that I really didn't want to talk about, and that's the New York Giants in just a moment after this. If you're anything like us at Utter Punts, we love the fantasy games surrounding the NFL, but sometimes they're a bit too focused on their American audiences. That's why we were blown away when the Fantasy Game Day app rolled into town, a weekly fantasy game with player values in pounds totally dedicated to the NFL's UK audience. There's insights and analysis and plenty of opportunity to compete with your friends, but the best bit, weekly cash prizes. Use code PUNTS when you sign up for a free entry after you play your first week. Yes, welcome back to Utter Punts. I desperately didn't want to talk about my New York Giants, but things are going from bad to worse. A blowout loss to Tampa Bay. It feels like the wheels are coming off. Who wants to start here? Because there's so much to get our teeth into around the Giants that, we could be here for a little while, couldn't we? Ollie, Daboll, the right guy for the job? No? Yes?
I think every week it's looking worse. And I don't even think it's the Giants' performances, as crazy as that might sound. Every week, the better Saquon Barkley plays, the worse it looks for the Giants. And I know that can be under general manager Joe Sheen, but I mean, Daboll, it just looks like poor decision. There was a video that came out about his line of questioning for when they drafted Malik Neighbors as well. Terrible line of questioning. Neighbors is a great player, don't get me wrong, but I think the wrong pick at the wrong time for what the Giants needed. Personally, they should have drafted JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix, even in hindsight, looking at how it's going, drafted Bo Nix. But yeah, I don't think Daboll's going to be in a job much longer. That's my inkling. Some people may say it should just be the GM fight, keep Daboll, draft a quarterback, but I don't see either of them staying in a job, personally.
No, I think Daboll's... I agree, I think Daboll's in trouble. I think it's the regression that we're seeing week after week. So, they didn't start well against the Vikings, and the Vikings put 20 points on them. It won by 20 points. And then week 2 and week 3, they seem to have a little bit of a renaissance and seem to turn it around and play a little bit to the limited strengths of Daniel Jones. But then literally after that, it's been one mess up after another. Malik Neighbors was being crowned the next big thing in the wide receiver, out of the wide receivers in the NFL after sort of 4 or 5 games. All of a sudden, he's missed 3 games and come back. And that offense can't move the ball on the ground, can't move the ball through the air. Ultimately, Dayball's an offensively minded coach, so his offense, the offense is going to be his responsibility to a large degree. And obviously, with what happened with Daniel Jones and him playing scout team safety before he requested and was granted his release, that it is what it is. But to bring in Tommy DeVito and for him to operate it just didn't look good. He looked slow in his decision making. He looked a bit noodle armed. He ultimately just didn't provide the spark for the Giants, and they got blown out by a Bucks team that have got a losing record, I think, and still have a losing record after that win yesterday. So it's a case of, he got absolutely smashed to pieces, and Baker Mayfield looked like a world beater at that Giants team did in the end.
We'll circle back to Malik Neighbours in a minute, because that's another piece of the story that's happened this week that's been really, really interesting. But let's just stick with a quarterback situation. If you're Drew Lock here, Dave, and you see Tommy DeVito go out and put that performance in, are you not knocking on the GM's door this week and going, do you know what? Give me my release as well.
Maybe. I mean, he's under contract. The thing is, you've just dropped and cut Daniel Jones, and I think it's a pretty good indication that you're tanking for a QB. And I think you're right that Drew Lock probably would be a better candidate to start than DeVito. But what's the real agenda there now? What I would say is, if that GM is going to be fired anyway, you'd have thought that he's going to, and Brian DeBall should also really be looking to try to prove that there's a reason to keep him in positions there, rather than thinking that way. So maybe the orders come from on high. Maybe the NFL is scripted as Tom Grossi has it, and Tommy DeVito's insisted that he start. I don't know, but at the same time, come on. The Giants are screwed now. They've taken the decision that making sure that they're not on the hook for some injury guarantees next year was more important than winning. In the off-season, losing Saquon to the Eagles, I mean, it was a ludicrous outcome to what was actually probably a fairly good decision based on whether or not you felt that the Giants were in a position to challenge. And if you felt that they weren't, you should let Saquon go. If, however, their assessment was that they were in a position to challenge, and they still let Saquon go, I don't know how the guy's still got a job, to be honest with you. So, all in all, Drew Lock, yeah, he might well want out, but where's he going to start anyway? And the most likely thing is that DeVito will be so bad that he'll be starting in the NFL again within the next 2-3 weeks anyway. Just simply because the fans will revolt. They won't tolerate it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Ollie, I'm just going to read you some of the things that Malik Neighbours said after the loss to the Bucks, and then we can talk about exactly how, if you're the head coach, you deal with that. In response to a question about why he didn't get at least one of DeVito's 5 passing targets in the first half, he said, "Talk to Dabs about that, Brian Daboll. They come up to me and ask me what plays I want, and that was that. I don't know. Obviously, it ain't the quarterback. Same outcome when we had DJ at quarterback. Take a look. It ain't the quarterback." Now, there's multiple levels to this. One, he's obviously frustrated, Ollie, at the lack of receptions that he was getting or the lack of targets that he was getting. But two, to come out and be that vociferous about the head coach probably tells you more about what's going on inside that franchise than anything else, doesn't it?
I have no problem with it from Malik Neighbours. I thought Brian Daboll and the New York Giants franchise have let him down. That player he's a stud. He's going to be a great player. Whether that ends up being at the New York Giants, I don't know. Obviously, it's only his rookie year. But I think the way that the Daniel Jones situation was handled was received very poorly by the players. Not saying he was performing well. He wasn't. But the way it was just a slow, horrible process, and we all knew he was going to be released, but it just dragged on. Then he did a statement, but they didn't announce he was released. I mean, it was just, it was horrible. And Brian Daboll, I mean, they've been terrible. And at the end of the day, you got to coach the pieces you've got. Stefanski last year, okay, the Browns aren't having their best season this year, but Stefanski last year, 12 wins with 4 quarterbacks. Made the playoffs, won a playoff game, if I'm right in remembering, and coach of the year. Now, I'm not saying Daboll has the best piece, but you have some good players. Brian Burns, Kieran Thibodeau, Malik Neighbours, to name a few.
Dexter Lawrence. Who also came out and said that some players weren't trying, and another player said that they were soft, and another player said that he didn't think that 100% effort was being given everywhere.
It's toxic, and I think that's the reason Daboll has to go. He'd probably be a good coach somewhere else, but I think the Giants and Daboll, that relationship is broken, and it's gonna end. It's gonna end up with him being fired, the GM being fired, and hopefully a quarterback drafted that can use Malik Neighbours' talents sufficiently.
Yeah, I think it's curtains for that entire regime. To be honest, I think what we saw on Hard Knocks at the start of the season, there was misalignment in the front office with how, and the owner with how the Saquon thing was dealt with. That has bled over into the team and the quality of performances that they've put out. It doesn't help that Saquon's gone on to be what he is at the Eagles and the production that he's put out there. It just makes everybody involved look a bit stupid, to be honest. But the stuff that's coming out of the Giants locker room over the last month or so, specifically in the last week or two, suggests that Daboll's lost the team. Because it's almost like players going into business for themselves and trying to protect their their reputation and and the people's perception of them. So to call out for a rookie wide receiver who was injured for 3 games, has played 8 games in the league, for him to be calling out the play calling of his head coach, that doesn't bode well for me. And Brian Daboll is also, I'm sure he's won Coach of the Year a couple of years ago or something like that. He was highly thought of with Josh Allen at the Bills, did a good job there. I don't think Daboll will struggle for another job, to be honest. I think if he gets the bullet, I think he could be straight back in there somewhere else. And you'd hope he's got a much better support network in terms of his GM, because his GM comes across as nothing short of an idiot, to be honest with you. So I think it's we spoke about it last week. There's the fairy tale of New York. At the moment, it's the curse of New York. Is what we're looking at with the Jets, who have already cleaned house. The Giants likely to clean house, and the Buffalo Bills are everyone's golden child in that respect. So it's like we said, the NFL is weird sometimes, and we are in a little bit of the twilight zone. So yeah, it is what it is.
I think we're starting to see reporters in and around the NFL now questioning whether either Daboll or Joe Shane, are the GM, are actually going to survive this. And even if Daboll goes, I'm still not sure that Shane's job's safe either. So, I mean, we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think somebody's already said it. It's a toxic mess in New Jersey at the minute. And not going to be a lot of fun, Dave.
I mean, I've got a job I'm quite happy with, but if they want to pay me for some part-time consulting, I'll be happy to point out to them the next quarterbacks that might actually work in the NFL. I've got a pretty good track record on that, better than NFL's right now. So I'll wait for an email, send it through. And,
Dave is the only one who, well, maybe you, Jim, as well, who had Bo Nix above Caleb Williams, and Bo Nix is right now the best performing quarterback of the rookie quarterbacks this season.
I did not have Bo Nix above Caleb Williams on the basis of I didn't think Bo Nix was a starting quarterback. So when we're doing the draft analysis this year, listen to absolutely nothing I have to say on quarterback evaluation. I'm also a Browns fan, so let's be fair. I have no experience with good quarterbacks. So to be honest, just read Bucky Brooks's NFL.com draft, which is usually a load of tripe. Read that. Go Google some stuff. Don't listen to what I have to say on draftable quarterbacks is probably the gist. But I did say I'd only take Caleb Williams because if I didn't take Caleb Williams, I'd get fired because I didn't feel like he was the best quarterback in the draft. And I thought it was Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy.
Who I also had rated over Caleb. But I'll be honest, I didn't have him rated over. I bottled it. I bottled it on the show. I know that we spoke about it and I told you what I thought, but I ended up just having Bo
Well,
Nix as an
it,
honourable mention, I believe.
it's been a
Yeah.
beautiful transition, but let's talk about the Broncos at the moment. They're one of the biggest surging teams in the NFL, which I don't think anyone saw coming. I thought
Hold that thought, Jim. I think it's a very good thing that we're going to talk about the Broncos, and we're going to do it right after this. Here at Utter Punts, we love watching the NFL with friends, and in our opinion, there's no better place to grab a bite to eat and watch the NFL than Beer Keller in Manchester. The burgers are massive, there's loads of HD screens, the wings are great, and there's a superb choice of drinks behind the bar too. Most importantly for us though, the people are brilliant, like-minded NFL fans who want to enjoy the game and have a laugh. It's definitely one of the best venues to watch your favourite team in. Yes, welcome back. We said that we were going to talk about the Broncos. In fact, I cut Jim off mid-sentence and now he's got to start at exactly the point that he finished. No, you haven't. You can just restart the point again, Jim, from the beginning. The most surging team in the NFL, I think you said?
Yeah, they are one of the top, most surging teams in the NFL. And who would have predicted it? To be perfectly honest with you, as we've just discussed, I thought Bo Nix wasn't a starting quality quarterback. But that defense is mean again with the Broncos, and he's got what he needs. He doesn't have a great supporting cast. He's got some veteran receivers and he's got a little bit of a running game, but there's not a massive amount on offense. And Bo Nix is making plays and he's looking after the football. And Ollie mentioned earlier that Bo Nix is looking like the best of the rookie quarterbacks at the moment. It's flipped on its head from Jaden Daniels from the first 8-9 weeks before he got injured. But ultimately, Bo Nix, he looks calm and composed in the pocket. He's picking defenses apart. I think they've had a favourable slate of games, to be fair, over the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks. So we need to bear that in mind. But at the same time, Bo Nix has, he's surprised me and he's surprised a lot of people. And he's looking like a really good future building block for the Broncos, which was something I personally thought the drafting of Bo Nix was going to cost Sean Payton his job. Because after bombing Russell Wilson out of there when you were paying him $45 million a year after 2 years and just saying, you know what, keep that other 90, I thought that was a brave decision. And then to take, the fifth quarterback in the draft that a lot of people had second and third round grades on at number 12 overall to lead your franchise. That's a ballsy move. They made that ballsy move because it reminded him of Drew Brees. I'm not going that far yet because we're 11 games into his career, but at the same time, I don't think they could have asked for anything better out of Bo Nix season to date. And they look like a probable playoff team at the moment.
I mean, one of my best mates is a Denver Broncos fan, so I get all the messages about them. So I will say, as Jim mentioned, with the favourable schedule, a lot of his touchdowns have been against playing the Raiders twice, and that game against the Falcons, where I don't think the Falcons scored a touchdown and Broncos put 38 on them. Here's a stat that Dave will find annoying if you want to refer to our stat video we did earlier in the year, a random one. Quarterbacks with 20 plus total touchdowns and 2 or fewer turnovers in 10 games span within a season over the last 10 years. Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and Bo Nix. There's a random stat for you.
No,
but it's good company to be in. He's performed well, but they have had a favourable schedule. Arguably, though, they should have one more win on there against Kansas City.
Ali,
field goal.
Without being funny, I do kind of want to slam you down on your stat, but I can't because there's a load of other stats as well. Apparently, he's on the verge of breaking the record for the number of big time throws thrown for a rookie. He's on numerous things, but I think the thing that surprised me more than anything was, do you know who Bill Parcells is, Al?
He was a coach, wasn't he, back in the day?
He was Mike Zimmer's mentor, and Mike Zimmer's always been very close to Sean Payton. I don't know this, but I think he might have been part of that Parcells tree as well at some point. And Bill Parcells had rules for drafting a quarterback. And while you were talking, it put those rules in my head. The rules are, it needs to be a 3-year starter, minimum. Bo Nix was a 4-year starter. Be a senior in college, he was. He graduated from college, he did. Start 30 games minimum. He started 61, right? Win at least 23 games. post a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. His was better than that, and complete at least 60% of passes thrown. He did 71, I believe, if memory serves. And he is playing like a experienced pro, and I think it's because of the depth of that college career. 61 college games, his 5-year career, right?
It was, and it was across 2 different colleges as well. I know he started for Oregon. I can't remember who he played for as well in college football, but you know, there's 2 teams, and Oregon's got a unique offense in college football. How quickly they go, so he's got experience in different systems. He ticks all of the Bill Parcells quarterback boxes. Sean Payton had a pretty good quarterback himself with Drew Brees, so he probably knows he knows what he's looking at to a point. As much as I don't like that man, but ultimately, you know, I didn't consider a lot of these points on my evaluation and went purely by the eye test on it. And I think when you watch Bo Nix, he's not got the strongest arm. He's not got the most. Sorry, I lost you then for a second.
We lost you. You went. He's not
my
got the
internet
strongest
connection
arm.
dropped.
It was like you'd gone. I'm just leaving on that. Mic drop. Done.
Yeah. So shall I start again?
It was. I mean, I think we go from the strongest arm. Just to fill in the blanks, it was Auburn, his other college.
Okay. Yeah. So. Bo Nix, he hasn't got the strongest arm. He didn't have the strongest arm in college, but like we said, 2 completely different offenses between Oregon and Auburn, the 2 teams that he played for. So he had some pedigree coming out. He failed the eye test for me when I watched it, but ultimately my eye test doesn't mean much apparently. So it is what it is. But Bo Nix is really carrying that Broncos team, as well as a really strong defense run by Vance Joseph. Who's got a really good track record of putting quality defenses on the field, and there's rumours that he'll be up for a head coaching job. And I think with the job that he's done, again with this Broncos defense, is probably warranted. But all credit goes to Bo Nix. You know, let's see how he gets on over the back end of the season, and let's see where the Broncos finish up, because this is year 1, and you've got to hope that, as a Broncos fan, that we don't see the sophomore slump like the Texans are currently seeing a little bit with CJ Stroud.
An interesting point about, and I'm sure we'll get on to Texans, but an interesting point about Vance Joseph. If you remember last season, I think they lost 63-20 to Miami, Denver, and there were a lot of calls for Vance Joseph to be fired as defensive coordinator. Apparently, this is according to my friend, so if it's a lie, it's on him, but apparently what it was that Vance Joseph was using the previous scheme that had already been there at the Broncos for the defense, and then in the off season tore it up and wrote a completely brand new scheme up. And since then, their defense has been top 5 in the league. He's massively improved, and he could potentially. I mean, there's going to be probably 9 head coaching jobs opening up, and he'll probably be one of those contenders. Probably down towards the bottom, because there are a lot of good potential head coaches from coordinators, and maybe Bill Belichick as well coming back in, and Mike Vrabel.
I think he might be primed for a New York job, to be honest, because I can't see who else is going to want one of those at the way that's going in New York at the moment, to be honest. So it might be that you're getting down to your 2nd and 3rd tier and your retreads for coaches when both New York teams are trying to actually interview for one. So it'll be interesting.
I'd rather go to Giants than the Jets. That's all I'll say on that.
I did see Riley Moss, a cornerback who, shall we say, stands out in the NFL. He's not as good with dealing with sunlight as others. He's been brilliant for them this year. On the other side from Patrick Surtain, it is, I think, but he got injured. So we're going to have to see whether or not they can actually still hold it down to the same level without 2. Honestly, Dan brought this up in the group chat, the number of good young corners that have come into the league. That was the best pairing that I was aware of in terms of 2 players who've only been in the league maybe 3 years. So we'll see if he can still do it down the stretch now that one of his starting cornerbacks is out injured.
Yep.
Right. You mentioned the Texans earlier. Their sophomore slump. They're 7-5 now after this weekend's debacle. What do you boys think about the 32-27 loss to Tennessee?
They got dominated by Will Levis. I don't have many further thoughts than that, to be honest.
Worrying about Stroud. To be honest, I think he's playing injured. And again, he's not getting credit for playing injured because they're hiding it on the injury report potentially. I mean, I'm just guessing. He looks like he's not able to put complete pressure on his left leg when he's throwing the ball long. And maybe there's a shoulder issue as well, but it doesn't look quite right to me.
It's a right hand injury.
Is that what's troubling him? Right, that's interesting. Now, he started to go off the boil, and he's a quarterback who we really liked him coming out of college. He got taken behind Bryce Young, and we're probably not going to spend a lot of time on it, or maybe we will, I don't know. But like, I couldn't believe the fact that Bryce Young was the one who is processing so much quicker than I've ever seen him before, particularly in the last game against the Chiefs. But since he came back after Dalton took over from him, just wanted to say I hoped I'd be wrong about him, and there's little signs there now that he's doing things I didn't expect him to be able to do. But Stroud, yeah, worried about him. Very, very, very worried about him.
I think the biggest issue with the Texans against the Titans yesterday was he got very little help. Joe Mixon ran for 22 yards on 14 attempts yesterday. And this is against the Titans team that have been run all over by plenty of teams. They've been passed all over by plenty of teams. And yeah, while Stroud was, not firing on all cylinders, he still threw 20 out of 33 for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. As a Browns fan watching Deshaun Watson, I'd take that weekly, to be honest, compared to what I have to watch. So, but yeah, there's no doubt CJ Stroud is not the quarterback that we saw last season. There's obviously a little bit of an issue there from a health perspective on his throwing hand. That can make gripping the ball uncomfortable. The offensive line hasn't been as strong as it was last season as well. That's another point. And I think when you see them having, the Texans wanted to be a run-first team to a point to open up that offense. If you completely shut down their run game, you don't have to defend it with a stacked box, and you can double cover the receivers on the outside, and that's what we saw a lot from the Titans yesterday. So I think the Titans had a really good game plan, and it's been one of the only games this season where they actually had a good game plan and executed on it properly. Will Levis actually looked like a professional quarterback yesterday as well, which he hasn't done on a few occasions this season. I saw a flippant comment from him I think it was after last week's game where someone said, "Oh, you're looking a bit better," and he goes, "Well, yeah, I'm not doing backhanded flips or anything like that now, so yeah, I'm going in the right direction." And I think with that, the proof's in the pudding. The Texans are no joke, and the Titans played well to beat them. So yeah.
No, I remember specifically both of you boys mentioning that the Texans might have, and CJ Stroud specifically, may have that sophomore slump. It's typical in the NFL, but I remember you both worrying about that. And there have been moments this year. I mean, not to talk too much about it, but the Vikings beat them 34-7. They've lost their last few games, I think, now. I mean, that's a disappointing result against Tennessee as well. Were they at home as well, the Texans? Yeah, so even more disappointing. 7-5,
divisional game, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it always throws up weird stuff.
7-5 though, you're still in playoff contention. It's not season over or anything by a long stretch, but with the amount of good teams in the AFC this year, and as usual, really, let's be honest, that it's not a good. It's a downward trajectory.
Can't see anyone beating them in their division. Who is it? Jags, Titans, and
Oh yeah, they're far and away. It's Jags, Titans, and Colts in that division. So I don't think they're under any significant pressure. But I think the piece with CJ Stroud is everyone went, Eureka, we've struck gold with this guy last season after some of the performances he put in. And I think there's then a tendency from a head coach to put a little bit more on the quarterback's plate in terms of, breaking down defenses and also by bringing in players like Stephon Diggs, who you've got to feed the ball to, otherwise he's going to have a hissy fit. So I think they put a bit more on CJ Stroud's plate, and I think it slowed his processing down a little bit, which has made him a little bit more indecisive. Whereas last season, his offense was very simple. It was 1 and 2 read stuff, get the ball out quickly, and and work on it like that. So I think we saw it a bit with Bryce Young at the start of the season. He's come back a lot better. I assume his study habits have changed or something like that. But there's always the danger of you think you've struck gold in that first year, and then you want to put that bit more on the quarterback's plate, and they can't physically handle it yet, and it needs to be a bit of a slower process. And as a result, the perception is they regress when actually they're not regressing. They're just having to deal with more information than they ever have had to before.
We've got time to talk about one more thing, and I'm going to throw a wild card in there, and it is the Detroit Lions, who are currently on the longest winning run of anybody else in the NFL. I understand that might smart for a couple of you, but what is it that's going so right with the Lions at the moment?
I won't say one thing that I found quite funny. I saw this meme that says the 10-1 Lions having their best season ever, first time 10-1 since 1934. The Vikings 9-2 dicking around with Sam Darnold in a transition year, only one win off them, which I found quite funny. But no,
as a Vikings fan, you would.
But, it's very accurate.
They're completely impartial on here, though, right? So
they are a great team. They're the best team in the league at the minute.
Mate.
They're the best team in the league at the moment. They're just putting away teams in a much more convincing fashion. I know the Chiefs are 10-1 as well, but a couple of really close games. Carolina, Denver. Dan Campbell is leading those guys. Ben Johnson is, as everyone knows, he's going to be a head coach after this season, probably. They've got all the pieces together. Goff is playing brilliantly, but that's because they have an elite O-line, and they look comfortable in every game. I think in the last 3 games, they haven't conceded a touchdown in the second half, which is insane. I mean, their defensive coordinator is doing a great job as well. They put everything together.
Hutchinson.
Yeah.
All without the top pass rusher. And I think when you look at the Lions, I agree with everything you've said. Probably the best team in football at the moment. Dan Campbell's probably the best head coach in football. The way he galvanises that offense and defense and special teams, his footprint's all over it, and he comes across as an absolute legend as well. From what I've seen of him interacting with fans, and there were some veterans at one of the games a couple of weeks ago, and what he did there was great. So I think. We've met. Look, let's be honest. Jared Goff. I can't remember what we were laughing about him for when we saw him on Hard Knocks, because he didn't know something really simple.
No. It was 2 things. It was, first of all, he told a story about a fight on the pitch where he started it and then ran away, and then he also didn't know where the sun rises. Which
yes,
I'm also not going to say where the sun rises, in case there are some people out there who don't know.
This is it, and the thing was, we were sitting there going, "This kid's ruined." So it didn't happen. He went to the Rams. They literally threw him in the bin, and it was a throw-in from a salary cap perspective to the Lions when they traded for Matthew Stafford with the Rams, and he's come through, and he is probably the most consistent quarterback in the league, and it's all without being particularly mobile. A lot of the top quarterbacks in there at the moment have got the ability to run around and make plays. Jared Goff just sits in the pocket and he pulls teams apart. It's enjoying. I enjoy watching the Lions, which I think Lions fans are probably enjoying watching the Lions, and it's probably the first maybe year and a half stretch that people can actually stomach watching an entire season of their football, because they've been so bad for so long. Dan Campbell deserves an immense amount of credit for what he's done there. Their front office GM, I don't know who it is, but he's done a great job in terms of stockpiling talent on that as well. And just all over the shop, they're just a really good, disciplined, fundamental football team, which is the opposite for what we spoke about with the Bears earlier.
Has Brad Holmes been advised by a certain Mr. Dorsey, who...
that we got rid of? Yeah, great idea.
Another player that they're missing as well is their linebacker Alex Anzalone, who broke his forearm, I believe, last week. So they're missing two key players on that defense, and they're still.
That'll give Jack Campbell a chance to actually there's only one. I wouldn't even call it a mistake. There's one investment they've made in the draft in recent times where they probably haven't performed up to the level you expected, and that's Jack Campbell. So now with Alex Anzalone out there, you might see Campbell actually playing in his preferred position for the first time. I'm hoping he doesn't turn out to be good as well, because they are ridiculous. And they're playing on Thanksgiving, aren't they? Let's not forget Thanksgiving coming up. 3 games on Thursday, folks.
They're just deep as well across that roster. It's just unbelievable depth in positions that matter, and they're dropping. Hutchinson went down. They traded for Zadarius Smith, but they already had some internal solutions as well that can creating pressure. But ultimately, the defense just ticks over and keeps them in games. It's the offense that's absolutely ripping teams to shreds at the moment. Well, I remember laughing about them drafting Jahmyr Gibbs at 15 not last draft, but the draft before.
It was at 8. That was why we laughed, right? And to be fair, what Gibbs has done, he's an exceptional talent. We knew that. The argument was, were you ever going to get enough production from him to justify it when you had a player like David Montgomery in front of him? And they said, well, we're going to use him in unique ways and try and get the best out of both of them. I didn't think that would be possible, but Ben Johnson is obviously a genius. And haven't they now set the record for the most number of games in a row where 2 different running backs have both scored touchdowns on the same team? I think it's 7. And the last team that did it was in 1931, and they were called the Golden Gilowatts or something like that from back in ancient times.
The last time Detroit Lions were good, basically.
Yeah. 90 years ago.
3 years before their last good start.
Yeah.
I love that. Boys, that's all we've got time for this week. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on as always. Jim, thank you.
Cheers.
Dave, thank you.
Aye, thanks, man.
Ollie, thanks very much for putting your travel into one side and joining us for a change.
Thank you, mate.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. We will be back with Utter Punts next week.